I've never been a fan of making dados with a router, so I usually take the extra time to make multiple passes on the table saw. But when working with large carcasses, that's not always an option. Now, when I'm using a circular saw, I can simply add a straight edge as a guide and get clean, precise cuts. But with routers, the spinning blade can cause drift because it pushes both towards and away from the fence. You could lock your router with a second straight edge, but setting that up can be time consuming, especially when you've got multiple cuts to make. Today I'll show you an easy solution using a piece of uni-strut. It's a single track system that uses bearings to lock the router in place to eliminate the dreaded drift. I've got most of my materials here. I haven't added the screws because I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to need later on, but I've got my dowel. You're going to want to be able to have your plate from the bottom of your router. And I've got a piece of plexiglass that's the same thickness as my router plate. I've also got uni-strut here as well as the hardboard. And again, as always, all the materials will be on the website. And I'm going to start off with my router base as well as the rectangular piece below it. And this is going to be about 2 inches wider than your router base. These two faces need to be flush with each other. And I do want to center this. And that looks pretty good. I'm just going to go ahead and mark a line around it. With this cut out, I'll press it up against my rail. I've got a piece of double-sided tape. It's just going to be here long enough that I can mark my second piece of stock. So I'll peel that off, and then this is going to fit so that the back end is flush to the rail. I'll bring this forward and now press down. With it pressed down, I can come in here and trace my circle that I cut earlier. And I can cut this out with the bandsaw. And if we've done everything right, this should fit right inside here like this, against our rail, with this piece on top. Now we can focus on our plexiglass. With my plexiglass, I'll add my piece that I just cut, and then my base is going to fit on the bottom like this. Because all the holes really don't make a lot of sense on the back, I'll go ahead and just find where they are and then mark them on the back with a fabric pencil like that. And now I can work on transferring these holes over. It is worth noting that this is upside down, that this is the way that my router will fit on the plexiglass. So if I flip this over, you'll see that I've got these indentations that I need to drill out with my drill bit. That will be on the bottom side of this. And so in order to make sure that I've got a hole that goes straight through, I'm going to be using a smaller drill bit to go all the way through. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. Then I want to flip this over and drill my larger hole before following through with the last final hole that will be the shaft of the screw. I do have my drill bit chucked up as far as I can go because I don't want to bend it as I'm drilling. I'll add my drill bit now to cut the head of the machine screw out. So I don't forget which side this goes on, I'm going to make sure that I put the letter T on the top so that when I flip this over, I can drill out those holes. Before I go any further, I want to make sure that I lock this at the depth that my router plate's set at. I've added a V-groove bit, and I'm just going to drop it down enough that I can make a mark. Then I can take this back over to the drill press. Before I attach this back to the base, I need to add some screws on the bottom side of this. I'm going to use some number 8s that are 3/4 of an inch long, and I'm going to use a single flute countersink bit to add the holes. I'll set my marking gauge to 3/4 of an inch, and you don't have to have one of these to do this. At 3/4 of an inch, I'll go ahead and trace both sides. One on this side, one over here, and one there. And then I want to set this to 1/2 of an inch. So I'll make a mark at 2 3/4. Put one here at 4 inches and 4 inches on the other side. With the side where the heads of the screws will go in, I want to make sure I place that upwards, and then I'm just going to put this right on top, and I'll use a marker to mark each spot out. I've got a single flute bit here that I'll use to drill this out, And I just want it to go in enough that the screw will be able to slide through the plastic. Twist drill bits really work best for plexiglass, so I've added an 11/64 bit. I'll go ahead and drill each one of these out now. Here's a fair warning. Make sure that you drill on the right side. It looks like I got the wrong side here, so I get to come over here to the other side and drill these 2 holes out. So from now on, you'll see these 2 holes, and that's just my mistake. Hey, it happens. Now, because I've already made a mistake and I don't want to make any more, I've gone ahead and clamped this up. Countersink holes are sticking up, and I'm going to come in here with an 11/64 drill bit. And now we'll drill each one of these out at 1/8 of an inch. With this now done, we're going to work on the arm that fits on the top. I'm going to take my marking gauge and I'm going to set it at 1 inch. And I want to come over on both sides 1 inch. So 1 inch there and 1 inch on this side right here. I'm going to take this to the table saw now and we're going to cut out notches that will fit a 1/4 inch bolt. Something I did forget is that I want to come in 1 inch from the bottom. So that's as high up as I want to go. And that's going to be the distance for my blade up to that point. So I'm going to line this up on here, and I'm just going to find the halfway point. Now I can take this off, and those are the 2 holes that I want to drill out. I will be using wood inserts. These are 1/4 of an inch, and they'll fit the bolts that I made earlier. And to make the bolts, I just took some thread locker and added a wing nut to a carriage bolt. The carriage bolts are about 1.5 inches long. I want to make sure that my drill bit does not go past the wood into that plastic, so I've set my stop right about there, and I'll go ahead and drill those holes out. Now, I guess you don't have to add epoxy, but I think it makes a lot of sense to do that here. I'm going to use an Allen wrench in my chuck, because sometimes these things are kind of hard to line up. If I just twirl it in like this, it makes it a whole lot easier. Make sure it's straight up and down and I'm not damaging the wood when I put it in. And there we go, it's perfect. I'll put my rollerblade bearings in the track, but I think it's important that we go with 1/2 inch on these. I think it'll be a little bit stronger than going with something like 3/8. When I slide these in the track, I need to note the position of where they are on the track so that I can set my arms and then know where to drill a hole on those arms. So if I add one of these studded knobs in here, I need to find the center of my bearing and then bring that up and make a mark on the top. With mine, I found it's about 1 inch up that I want to be, and then really anywhere along here, it doesn't really matter that much. But because I am so close to the edge, I think I'm going to go in about 2 inches on each side. I'll make a mark in at 1 inch and then at 2 inches. We can drill these out at the diameter of our rod, and this is 1/2 of an inch, so I'll be drilling this out at 1/2 of an inch. And the rod that I'm using is a hard oak dowel, which I think is important. We don't want these to flex in any way. Executive decision here, I'm going to move in 1 inch and 3/8 from the edge. I've measured the length of my dowels to be 1.5 inches from the top here to slightly above the bottom of my rail. I'll add them to the bottom side here. To install this, it's really simple. After we've added our arm in the track, we can slide this up here, and all we're doing is we're pressing this up against the rail and locking it down. There's really not much more to it. With my router added now, it slides fine along the track, but I still need to be able to clamp this down. If you remember with my other track that I made for the circular saw, I needed to extend this enough that I could put my clamps on here without having to worry about the housing in the back. Fortunately for us, we don't have to worry about that, but we do have the arm that covers the track up. So I can't put clamps on the rail. So what I need to do, just like the other one, is to add a backing on the bottom of my rail, which is something that I can attach my clamps to. Just like the last one, I'm going to be using some double-sided tape. I'll attach my rail to the hardboard, but I want to overlap it by just a little tiny bit. We really only need this little tiny section back here to add our clamps to. But I want this to be flush to the steel. But right now I'm going to add my tape. With this attached with just the tape, I need to add screws through the bottom. With my circular saw track, I just drilled through the top like this and then added my screws down from below. But the one problem that we run into with this is that these bearings take up a lot of the track. So we need to make sure that our screws are underneath the lip, and that's difficult to drill out from the top down. So what I'm gonna do instead is flip this over, and then I'm gonna drill along this side here, and it's just gonna be enough, probably right about here. I wanna drill in all the way down. And to make this easy on myself, I'm just gonna use a chalk line to make my mark. A ruler would work just fine as well, but this is quicker. Make sure that the side that you drill on is also gonna be the wider side, because this part will be where the router will run across. With the countersink bit, I can come back in here and finish each one of these off. Then we can take a chisel and clean up the top. Now I can clean up the side with a flush cut bit. I'm really happy with how this turned out, but there's a problem that comes with plunge routers and dados that can be really frustrating. And that is when you go to measure them out, where are you measuring your lines? Are you measuring double lines and then trying to make a groove between them? Or are you making a single line and then trying to find the center of it so that you can make your cut across? I don't like doing double lines because it's a lot of measuring, it's a lot of work, and it can be done easier. So what we're gonna do is make a simple jig for this. I added a V groove to my router, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this on the edge of my table. I'm gonna make a very simple cut right on the edge, and this will tell me exactly where the center is with my router. Now, with this over at the table saw, I can move one of my teeth so that it's right at the tip of where I made that cut. And I've got two different jigs here that will help me to line this up properly and make it a whole lot easier later on. To demonstrate this, I've got some dados that I need to cut out on this board. I've already got my lines drawn, and this is gonna be the dead center of my dados. The first thing that I'm gonna do is take my jigs, I'm gonna line them up like this. I wanna line them up on that line. I know that that is gonna be the center of my dado bit. Once I've got my jigs in place, I can come in here and attach my router track to the plywood. With my router now attached, I can go ahead and make my first cut, which is going to be at 1/8 of an inch, plunge it down another 1/8 of an inch, and then make this final cut. With that one now cut, I can detach my clamps, and I'm going to move it on to the next one. I'll come in here now with the caliper and we're going to check this out. So my first one, 2719, 2719.95, and this last one, 2722. But I think that that's pretty accurate for what I've got here. I think now there's a couple things that we can do to make this better. I ended up adding a little bit of wax to the front edge of this, which made it slide a little bit better on the last pass. You'll want to make sure that with each pass that you check to make sure that this is not rocking, that it's tightly squeezed against the back rail, as well as making sure that your knobs are really tightened down really well. This one seems to have a problem with loosening up a little bit, which is okay, it just means I need to tighten it down every time. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you're leaving a comment, please take a moment to thank my patrons for helping to keep these projects and the website free. You'll find a link in the description with all the materials, tools, and tips used in this video. If you want to support the channel and help cover the website cost, you can also find a link to become a patron. And as always, keep making things.